In December 1914, 28 men sailed from South Georgia aboard the Endurance, bound for the first land crossing of Antarctica. They never set foot on the continent. Pack ice locked their ship in place, then slowly crushed it to nothing. Stranded over 1,000 miles from civilization with no radio and no chance of rescue, every one of them survived. What Shackleton did to make that possible rewrote the meaning of leadership itself. The voyage began at Grytviken, a remote whaling station on the edge of the sub-Antarctic. On December 5th, the three-masted Barkentine cleared the harbor, steering south toward the Weddell Sea. Sir Ernest Shackleton's plan was unprecedented in scope. Land on the frozen coast, then march across the South Pole to the Ross Sea. It was an ambitious imperial gamble, requiring absolute confidence in both the timber of their ship and the resolve of the crew. Yet only 48 hours after leaving port, the open ocean vanished. The first white floes appeared, and their true adversary became the ice itself. By mid-January 1915, the trap closed. Just 80 miles from their planned landing site at Vassal Bay, the Endurance came to a dead stop. Extreme northeasterly winds packed the ice floes tightly against the continental coast, cementing the ship into a solid, multi-year sheet of pack ice. What began as a bold transcontinental march instantly shifted into an agonizing waiting game. For 10 long months, the crew lived aboard their wooden home, suspended in an ocean they could no longer reach. The Antarctic winter descended, bringing temperatures down to minus 30 degrees and winds that screamed across the frozen void. The danger here was not sudden. It was a slow, suffocating buildup of pressure. Day after day, the ice groaned and shifted, tightening its grip on the wooden hull. Shackleton kept the 28 men focused on daily routines, transforming the ship into a floating village to keep despair at bay, while outside, the relentless white walls of the Weddell Sea slowly pressed closer. On October 27, 1915, the relentless pressure of the Weddell Sea reached its breaking point. Massive ice floes ground against the oak timbers, tearing away the ship's rudder and splintering its heavy keel. Water flooded the engine room, overpowering the hand pumps. Recognizing that the vessel was unsalvageable, Sir Ernest Shackleton ordered the 28 men to abandon ship. The crew unloaded their tents, emergency supplies, and 3 wooden lifeboats directly onto the shifting ice floe. They did not lose their home in a single, sudden crash. Instead, they watched it die slowly. Over the next 25 days, the battered hull of the Endurance groaned, tilted, and sank bit by bit into the freezing depths. When the last mast disappeared beneath the ice, the grand imperial expedition was gone. Shackleton abandoned all plans of crossing the continent, dedicating every decision to keeping his men alive on the drifting pack. The 28 men now lived directly on the frozen, moving surface of the Weddell Sea. For 5 grueling months, a shifting sheet of pack ice just a few feet thick was all that stood between them and the ocean depths. They established Ocean Camp, and later Patience Camp, surviving on the remaining tinned rations, biscuits, and cocoa salvaged from the sunken ship. As those stores dwindled, daily survival depended entirely on hunting. Seal and penguin meat became their primary food, with seal liver consumed regularly to prevent the onset of scurvy. Life settled into a monotonous, freezing routine. Shackleton enforced strict order, scheduling daily work parties, morning briefings, and evening gatherings where Leonard Hussey played his banjo to keep despair at bay. But discipline could not control their geography. Below their feet, the vast ocean currents carried the ice floe in an unpredictable, meandering drift northward. The danger was constant and silent. They were completely at the mercy of the wind, drifting toward warmer waters where their frozen platform would inevitably crack, fracture, and melt away. On April 9, 1916, the ice platform beneath Patience Camp split in 2. With their frozen refuge disintegrating, Shackleton ordered the 28 men into the 3 small wooden lifeboats, the James Caird, the Dudley Docker, and the Stancomb Wills. They launched into a chaotic maze of grinding pack ice and freezing open water. For 6 agonizing days through deep seas, the crew rode through a storm-tossed sea, completely exposed to sub-zero winds and blinding spray. Sleep was impossible. Salt water soaked their clothes, freezing solid against their skin. Navigator Frank Worsley steered through the gloom, seeking a tiny speck of rock on the horizon. On April 15th, the exhausted men dragged their vessels onto the narrow, gravel beach of Elephant Island. It was a bleak, uninhabited mountain of rock and ice, but it was solid ground. For the first time in 497 days, the men stood on land. But solid ground offered no salvation. Elephant Island lay hundreds of miles from shipping lanes, entirely isolated from the outside world. Recognizing that waiting on this frozen rock meant slow starvation, Shackleton chose action over passive survival. He split his crew, appointing his trusted second-in-command, Frank Wild, to maintain strict discipline and keep 22 men alive under the overturned hulls of the remaining boats. For himself and 5 companions, Shackleton planned a desperate gamble, an 800-mile journey back to the whaling stations of South Georgia. Their craft was the James Caird, a wooden lifeboat measuring just 22.5 feet long, hastily reinforced with raised sides and a fragile deck of canvas and boxwood. On April 24, 1916, they pushed the heavily ballasted boat into the freezing surf, leaving their companions behind. They were launching into the tempestuous Southern Ocean, where gargantuan waves and sub-zero winds reigned. Could a vessel this small survive the most violent seas on Earth? For 17 days, the James Caird fought hurricane-force winds and 80-foot waves. Inside the freezing 22-foot craft, navigator Frank Worsley faced a nearly impossible task. With thick clouds obscuring the sky, he captured only 4 brief sunsights with his sextant, relying instead on dead reckoning to estimate their position in the roaring darkness. Missing the small island of South Georgia meant drifting into the open Atlantic to certain death. On May 10th, Worsley's calculations proved flawless as icy cliffs emerged from the mist. They had made landfall, but on the uninhabited western coast, still separated from rescue by uncharted mountain peaks. On May 19, 1916, Ernest Shackleton, Frank Worsley, and Tom Crean set out to cross South Georgia's glaciated spine. They possessed no sleeping bags, no tents, and no proper climbing equipment. To tackle the steep, icy slopes of the Allardyce Range, they hammered brass screws from the James Caird directly into the soles of their worn leather boots. For 36 continuous hours, the 3 men marched through freezing fog and across uncharted crevasses. Relying only on a 50-foot rope and a carpenter's adze, they pushed their exhausted bodies over razor-thin ridges, knowing that their comrades on Elephant Island depended entirely on their ability to reach the whaling station on the other side. Reaching Stromness was only the first step. 3 successive rescue attempts failed, as heavy pack ice blocked every approach to Elephant Island. Finally, in late August, Shackleton secured the Chilean steam tug Yelcho, commanded by Captain Luis Pardo. On August 30th, 1916, the small vessel breached the fog surrounding the island. As they neared the beach, Shackleton shouted across the water, "Are you all well?" The cry came back, "All safe! All well!" Against all odds, every member of the 28-man crew made it home alive. More than a century later, on March 5, 2022, the search expedition Endurance 22 located the wreck 3,008 meters below the Weddell Sea, preserved in the icy darkness, a physical anchor to an unforgettable story of human endurance. Today, the silent wreck of the Endurance rests in the frozen deep, a monument to unbroken resolve. In our modern world, Shackleton's legacy reminds us that true leadership isn't about reaching the destination, it is about bringing everyone home. Subscribe for more incredible survival stories.